we do have new Enneacraft support in Blazing Dominion. Of course, we've already seen the new Heka hands, and now it is time for the new Enneacraft, and then soon, hopefully, we will see the new cool tunes as well. I'm excited for Enneacraft support. I like this deck. I think it's a cool playstyle that unfortunately doesn't really, you know, get to shine at the moment. It has a lot of problems. It's very slow. It's very weak to Droll and Lockbird. So let's see if any of this can change any of those problems. All right. We have, it looks like in this small picture here that is now bigger, we have one small Enneacraft, a big Enneacraft, and a new spell. All right. Let's see if they fall in the same like category as the existing ones. Level 1 Earth Machine Pendulum, Enneacraft Trito Exapathesia. Pendulum effect. You can only use the second effect once per turn. Each time a monster is flipped, place a counter on this card. You can pay 900, reveal 3 Enneacraft from your deck. Your opponent randomly picks one to add to your hand, shuffle the rest into the deck. Okay, this is the same effect as all of the other level 1 pendulums, which is really good. Another starter basically for the deck is really important. It's not going to help into Droll and Lockbird to have more searchers, but in general for the consistency of the deck, this is very big. Just having more starters, basically more copies of Cleaford Scout. Really good. Monster effect. It has the same effect of reveal this card in your hand, special a monster from your hand, and face down defense. I assume they all are going to have this, even the big ones. I mean, they all do so far. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect that sets a card, you can change this face down card to face up defense position, add an Enneacraft card from your deck to your hand. Okay, this is neat. I mean, what kind of cards can you use this against? Draco Tail comes to mind, of course. If Draco Tail is trying to do any fancy chain blocking by putting the Draco Tail effects, like the graveyard effects, on higher chains, you can flip it up like that. But in a lot of decks, Ryziel Cross, you mean Star Ryziel? Sure, Star Ryziel, Labyrinth. Not a lot of decks that, I mean, it's gonna be relatively easy to play around, I suppose, but realistically, that doesn't have to matter. You don't have to summon this in a matchup where it doesn't do anything. You can just use it as a scale, right? And yeah. But in some matchups, it's going to be cool. Flip. Destroy one spell trap your opponent controls, and if you do, special summon a monster from your hand in face down defense position. Yeah, this to me just feels like they wanted to make one that's good against Draco Tail. Because when your opponent activates like Pan, Urgula, whatever, you just flip this up, search a card, and then pop whatever they set, right? That's the idea of this card. It's like they set a spell trap, so you pop it after, and you get a search. This is not amazing. I would say this is probably one of the worst level 1 Enneacrafts. However, I think the most important thing is just having more of this, right? More scales is important, I think, in Enneacraft. Just as many consistency cards as possible for this deck is good. The monster effect barely matters, but in some matchups, it could be cute. Okay, and then we have the big one, Enneacraft Atil Spia, which is a level 9 light machine, just like all the other ones. Same stats and everything. Let me quickly check. Each time a monster is flipped face up, one counter. At the end of the battle phase, if you have an Enneacraft in your other pendulum zone, target a monster with less attack than this card, destroy it. Yep. Exact same pendulum effect as all of the other big ones as well. Monster effect, reveal this card in your hand, special summon a monster from your hand in face down defense. Can't special summon the turn you activate except in face down defense. All right, same effect here. When your opponent activates a card or effect as chain link 3 or higher, quick effect, you can change this face down card to face up defense position, negate the activations of your opponent's cards and effects activated before this effect in this chain, and if you do, destroy the negated cards. Oh. Oh, that's nasty. That's good. This kills Draco Tail? I mean, okay. It's good against Draco Tail because when they summon Arthalion with 2 Draco Tails, they want to create 3 Chainlings. At the same time, you could also just make Arthalion with, let's say you have Arthalion and Pan. You can just activate 2 of them, right? It's not like you're going to lose all 3 effects. You're just skipping on 1. right? So you would just basically never, you would try to never go to Chainlink 3, which is a big restriction for some decks, right? And it also, I think the more practical application for this card is that it makes it a lot harder for your opponent to respond to your cards. I think that is the more practical application. Like basically the example is your opponent does something, you chain to it, which is Chainlink 2, and then your opponent knows, oh, if I chain to this, I get destroyed, right? I think that's the bigger deal. It's not so much that, oh, when my opponent summons an Arthalion, then they can't activate everything. It's more so that you stop your opponent from just responding to your stuff. After this card was flipped face up, while it's in the monster zone, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of their own cards. Ah, okay. So that just prevents chain blocking, basically, is what that does. Which is good, because it solves a big problem for this deck, I think, which is chain blocking in general. Like one key thing, hold up, let me pull up the card. I think the card that this is most important for is, yes, I'm thinking of this one. This one is when your opponent activates a card or effect that would destroy a card on the field, you can change it to face up and then your stuff can't be destroyed. So this is important to stop your opponent from like Raigekiing all your face down Enneacrafts, right? But one reason why the Mitsurugi matchup, for example, is horrible for Enneacraft is your opponent just chain blocks the Murakumo. They just summon Murakumo and they go, well, Chainlink 1 Murakumo, Chainlink 2 Kusanagi, and you can't do anything about that. So that was a huge problem. And I suppose this card is meant to help with this. However, the problem I see here is that you always have to find a way to flip this up before that happens, right? So, because in this example, right, when your opponent summons Murakumo and uses Kusanagi as material, and they know you have this card, what they can do is Chainlink 1 Murakumo, Chainlink 2 Kusanagi, and just don't do anything as Chainlink 3, and then you can't stop it with this, and you also can't stop it with this, right? So Chainlink 1 Murakumo, Chainlink 2 anything else still cooks Enneacraft. Unless you find a way to get this thing flipped face up first. If you flip this thing face up first, then your opponent just cannot chain block anything anymore, which matters for all of your Enneacrafts, right? There's other ones as well, like there's one that prevents targeting. So if your opponent has any targeting effects, they cannot chain block them anymore. So basically, once you establish this card face up, it's going to be very hard to outplay your other Enneacrafts, which is cool. I like that. But the problem is, it's not that easy to set it up. But I think the second effect is the better one anyways. I think the second effect, disincentivizing your opponent to like negate or chain to your cards, is pretty big. Also, just imagine like on your own turn, if you can find a way to summon the whale, for example, and this one to your side of the field, right? If your opponent does something and you chain the whale to negate it, your opponent doesn't want to chain to that, because if they chain to that, then this destroys them, right? This is good. This is a good card, and I think that's important for Enneacraft, because I think the concept of Enneacraft is solid. Believe it or not, even though the deck is basically seeing zero play right now, I think the deck is not that far from a working concept. And this card gets them closer to it, because quite frankly, besides the whale, the other big Enneacrafts are pretty garbage right now. The small ones are all fine because they're all Rhodas. But the big ones are pretty, like, this one is pretty bad because it gets chain blocked all the time. And the other one, the one that prevents targeting, is even worse because that gets chain blocked even easier. So like both of the other big Enneacrafts are, and this one is, I think, even worse. Oh yeah, no, this one's fine actually. When your opponent activates a card or effect in response to your card, change this card face up and then return 3 cards. No, this one's fine. This one's good. Yeah, Leon is good and the whale is also good, but the other two were pretty mediocre. So getting another big one that's good is important. Don't the small ones have mandatory effects? Makes it much harder to avoid getting to Chainlink 3. If on a previous chain, one of these has been flipped face up, that is Chainlink 1 mandatory. Yes. if anything happens that triggers one of your small Enneacrafts, and then therefore they are like, let's say your opponent activates Ketu Draco Tail, and you flip face up, which one would that be? This one. This is not the one that when adds, but it works with the example I'm trying to make. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect that special summons a monster, which is Ketu Draco Tail, you can flip this up, and then after the chain resolves, your opponent performs a fusion summon with Ketu Draco Tail, and then you have Chain Link 1, this one, because it's mandatory. Negate the effects of one effect monster your opponent controls, which is horrible in this example, by the way. It's horrible in all cases, like Mitsurugi or Draco Tail, because you're mandatory Chain Link 1, and then they put Murakumo or Arthalion as a higher Chain Link. It's awful that this one's mandatory. It's really bad, unless it's your own turn, I guess. But for the most part, it's really, really bad against the problems that the deck has, like Murakumo. But now, if this is mandatory Chain Link 1, if your opponent wants to chain block their Murakumo, they have to go to Chain Link 3, right? They have to go Chain Link 2 Murakumo, Chain Link 3, whatever else, right? So basically, if you get into a situation, this is a lot of ifs and whens and so on, but if you get into a position where you have this one and the new one face down, you basically, it's checkmate, right? Your opponent either puts the Murakumo Chain Link 2 and doesn't chain to it, then you can negate with this, or not negate, but flip this up, or if your opponent goes to Chain Link 3 to chain block the Murakumo, you can respond with this, right? And that would negate the entire chain for your opponent, which is good. That's a good, not this one, this one. You get more flexible in your, it's not as easy to outplay the full Enneacraft board anymore, right? If you can get to both of these together, it gives actual value to cards like this one because you can't just chain block it, right? So this card I think is important in the grand scheme of things. Like trying to wrap my head around the concept of Enneacraft, which I think is pretty cool, but I also haven't played it myself yet, which I still really want to do. I still want to make a video on Enneacraft, which I'll probably do soon. I'll build it and go to locals with it and all that. Haven't found the time for that, unfortunately, yet. But I think that this solves some problems for the deck. But like, I don't think it's broken. I think this is something that like promotes interesting interactions, because I do see that I think a good player can definitely maneuver around this, I think, with the information that they are given, because you're not always going to have every Enneacraft on the board, right? You only have 5 slots. You can't have every possible Enneacraft. You have to, depending on what you draw and what you can search, you have to decide which ones you go for. And so like that information is going to be somewhat visible to your opponent because they're going to see your searches, they're going to see what you get, and maybe there's going to be a way to outplay this. This is not as broken because it does take quite a bit to go to Chain Link 3 or higher in any given moment before they could out it, right? Your opponent doesn't know what you have exactly. Yeah, I mean, then it'd be terrible. If they always know and see which one gets summoned where, that would be awful. So that's good, right? Like, it's good that you don't always see what they add, and it's good that you don't see where they summon what. Otherwise, the deck wouldn't work, right? As long as you don't get drolled. Yeah, droll. I mean, none of these help against droll, right? Both of these are completely useless against droll. And quite frankly, I'll tell you right now, while Droll and Lockbird is in the format as popular as it is right now, this deck will never be meta. Never. It cannot be. Because Droll and Lockbird destroys this deck completely. You have no chance against Droll and Lockbird. Enneacraft Reset. Normal spell card. You can only activate a card with this card's name once per turn. Place one Enneapolis from your deck or grave face up in your field zone, or if you already control it, you can negate the effects of face up cards your opponent controls up to the number of cards in your pendulum zone instead. Okay. It's not my favorite bonus effect. I'm a really big fan of this mechanic of get the field spell, but if you already have the field spell, I do something else, preventing the cards from being completely dead if you draw them with the field spell. The bonus only applying going second is kind of mediocre, and it's not the greatest bonus, let's be real. It's okay when you're playing into the board. It negates cards forever, which is important. But I would have preferred if it had a bonus effect that was useful going first. But it's a good card to activate into a board. But you do need scales set up already. But I can imagine like going second into a board, you have a lot of ways actually with Enneacraft. I think when I pick up this deck eventually, even with the new cards especially, I'm going to be surprised how well this deck can play going second, because you can summon the whale to negate stuff. You can summon this to prevent them from chaining too much to your stuff. Now you have this, so I can see just like summoning 1 or 2 Enneacrafts or even more, and then activating scales, searching without losing card advantage, and then eventually activating this, and that could be a really good way to play into boards with it actually. So yeah. If your opponent activates a card or effect while this card's in your grave, you can banish this card, change Enneacraft monsters you control to face down position up to the number of cards in your pendulum zone. Ooh, that's interesting. So we have a lot of ways to flip Enneacrafts face up, but we don't have many ways to flip them back face down, which of course is also valuable. Because sometimes you flip something face up, like the whale on your turn, and then you want it back face down, and that card gives you this ability. This is nice. It's also worth noting that if the translation here is accurate, this card says you can only activate a card with this card's name once per turn. Activating a card does not count as activating its effect in the graveyard. So this second effect, if you have multiple copies in the grave, if I'm reading this right, or if it's translated correctly, is not once per turn. So if you can somehow get multiple into the graveyard, which is not easy because it is once per turn to activate, but if you can somehow get 2 in the grave, you could use it twice to set your stuff back face down. So interesting. I like these. I'm also a big fan of Enneacraft as a deck. I really like how it feels like a completely new concept for a Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I think that's very interesting. It also kind of just happens to be like a very control-y deck, which is really up my alley. I'm still not entirely sure. Like, one thing I've noticed when I messed around with the deck a little bit, which I haven't played it much, but like paying 900 for each activation was a little weird, because on turn 1 it's fine, but on turn 2 already you're basically not able to do all your searches anymore because you're just like running really low on life points. Like, that's a genuine problem with Enneacraft. So I'm not entirely sure why they added that sort of like restriction to a control deck that's meant to outlast your opponent. That's a genuine concern I have, and none of these cards do anything about this. It's weird to have a concern about life point costs in a modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but I think the way this deck plays, in my head, I think that could genuinely be a problem, because like, you're trying to like search as many cards as possible on turn 1, which is going to cost you, I mean, if you have 5 of these level 1 scales now, and if you manage to resolve all 5, you're paying 4,500 life points, which is a lot. And that's going to put you into, first of all, it's going to make you relatively easy to kill if your opponent actually breaks through your board. And it's going to make your follow-up significantly weaker even if you manage to control the board. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's going to be a factor, but I do have to play the deck first in order to find out. So these cards are good. They're not broken, but they are kind of like what Enneacraft needs. I don't think Enneacraft needs really broken cards. I think Enneacraft just needs more solid cards to make it so you can fill a whole deck with cards that fit the theme, especially the Searcher. I think even though the second card is the fanciest, I think the first one is the most important, just because it's another Searcher, another starter for the deck. I think that's awesome. So no matter, this card could have even not had a monster effect and it still would have been really important. The realistic answer, is this enough to make Enneacraft matter, is unfortunately 100% dependent on Droll Lockbird. If they don't touch Droll Lockbird, not like, if they maybe do something like limited or semi-limited, then there's a bigger chance I would ever like be able to play this deck in like a competitive tournament. Like, of course it's fine, it's going to be fine at locals, completely fine. But realistically, at a big tournament, if Droll is in the format, you're not going to touch this deck. Like, you just cannot. It depends on Droll and Lockbird, honestly. It depends on the future of Droll and Lockbird in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, I suppose, is the realistic answer to whether this deck is gonna be good or not. Because this deck screams, you die to Droll. Like, the whole concept of the deck loses to Droll. But the cards are cool. I like it.